Welcome back, everyone. Glad to be joining you here for our second Cabral HouseCall of the weekend. Today is episode 2298. Hopefully you tuned into yesterday's show, episode 2297. All podcasts can be found at stephencabral.com/podcast if you'd like to read along with these questions. But yesterday, we answered some really great ones. I have no doubt that today's questions will be equally as amazing. But yesterday we answered questions on the virus and how it has kicked up other viruses in people's bodies, like herpes simplex-based virus. We talked about muscle knots and stiffness in the neck and shoulders and why it will ultimately never go away with stretching or adjustments or foam rolling or et cetera, if you're not also doing other things at the same time. I explained that very simply on yesterday's show. We also talked about a water softener that I recommend. And let's see what else. We talked about low white blood cells, Epstein-Barr virus, CMV. We talked about high levels of calcium in the blood. And then we talked about why people with disordered eating or anybody with any type of maybe even having gone on a low carb diet for a long period of time has a really difficult time reintroducing other types of food. So we really went over all of those different items, and hopefully you tuned in to yesterday's show. So let's get into today's show, though. Enough about yesterday. Let's get into today. So today's episode 2298, all things health, wellness, anti-aging. Let's go. First question is from Stephanie. Stephanie says, "Hi, Dr. Brawl. I'm a night shift nurse, and I'm having a tough time with timing my meals, food during the days and nights. I'm trying to be as healthy as I can working the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I know the number one best thing for me to do for my health would be able to switch to the day shift, but unfortunately with the staffing shortages of the hospital, I'm unable to switch as of right now, and I need to stay on nights. I work 3 nights of 12-hour shifts a week. Would you be able to recommend the best meal timing for the nights I am working? I've listened to your podcast about meal timing for a normal sleep cycle with being awake during the day, which I follow on my off days. Thank you so much, Stephanie, a fellow New Englander." All right, Stephanie. Well, for a fellow New Englander, I would be happy to answer your question. So it's a little bit different, though, your question as a nurse. Let's say you were a night shift worker and you, let's say, work 7 to 7, same thing, right? And let's say that you went to bed then at 10 a.m. and you slept until what time? Well, doesn't give you a whole lot of time, right? Let's say you got home at 8 o'clock in the morning, and let's say you went right to sleep then by 8:30. Okay, so 8:30 a.m. you get into bed. All right, so 8:30 a.m., if we wanted to put in 8 hours, we would be at 4:30 p.m., right? So I think that's the right math. I apologize if I'm not doing the right math and speaking at the same time and reading questions and processing information. I'm giving myself a little excuse here, but you know what I'm getting at. So what you would want to do is you would want to stop eating 3 to 4 hours still before going to bed for the night or the morning, right? So you'd want to stop eating around 4:30, 5:30 a.m. for you. And so the challenge is, though, as a nurse, you're not able to necessarily eat because you're running from room to room and doing a lot of work. And I've worked with a lot of nurses myself, a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends, and even family nurses as well. So I totally get it. For the average individual, though, and you could read into this how you would like, you would eat your breakfast essentially an hour or so before getting into work. Then the same about 4 hours later or so, you would have your lunch. And then after that, another 4 hours or so later, you would have your dinner, which would have then be the 4:30, 5:30 or so a.m. And that's how it would work over a 12-hour period of time. So that's really what you're looking at. You get your 3 meals in. For you, it's more challenging. So what I've done with nurses in the past with night shift is actually make your smoothie either the one that you drink when you get home or at the end of your work shift, because you can kind of drink it as you go and work, right? So that can be your water bottle or your thermos, whatever you want to call it. So you basically do your breakfast before you start your shift. Somewhere 4 hours or so, 4.5 hours later, you're going to be having your bigger meal, okay, then you can be on your feet working. And then that one that you would have towards the end of your shift so that you can then just get into bed with nothing really in your stomach would be the last one. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, this is not, anything that has to be exactly as I recommended, but that's why I give you the reasoning behind it, because then you could work out what works best for you as well. All right, Anita is up next. Thank you for your podcast and all you do to promote health and wellness. I appreciate you. Thank you, Anita. I appreciate you. I am not able to tolerate any supplements or the detox protocol. I do okay for 1 or 2 days, and then I'm terribly sick and cannot tolerate hardly any foods. She just goes through SNP, cytochrome P450 based issues, overall functional effect, no enzymes function, blood. Unable to clear from my liver, blood thinners, PPIs or antifungals, anti-seizure drugs, SSRIs, TCAs. Okay, so totally get it. My question is there any enzyme I can do to reverse the effects of these genes? Thank you so much. Okay, so I don't want to get too deep into genetics right now. I'll be teaching genetics more this fall and then early 2023. And the reason is I try to do everything foundationally and succinctly, and then get deeper and deeper and deeper. So I don't want people to start getting into their genes and all these deeper things if they haven't done the foundational work. You read the rain barrel effect, you listen to the, initial, the foundational podcast, you kind of keep working your way up. That's the goal. Then we start talking about genes. You can't change your genes. Now, you can change the expression of them, but you can't change your genes. So I know what you're saying because I have COMT issues, I have MAO issues, I have MTHFR issues. I didn't hit the genetic lottery in terms of those specific genes. So I have the same detox issues that you may have. I have the inflammation issues that you may have because of the MTHFR issues. And I also have a few others and the DAO, which means I'm not producing very much diamine oxidase for histamines. So I get it. Your job then, though, is to not eat the foods or live the lifestyle that exacerbates your genes. So for me, I try to help out the people that are not helped out. And those are people that can't over-exercise or they can't overdo a lot of heavy proteins. And the reason is my body produces a lot of dopamine because it can't clear it very well from the body. It takes 3 to 4 times longer for me to clear stress hormones, norepinephrine, cortisol, and you could even put dopamine in that, or even glutamine, from the body. And so I have to be aware of that. So for me, everything is leading to my stress bucket. And so what I do is I do the opposite of that. So there's nothing you can do necessarily to change the genes. However, you can change the expression of the genes by essentially the de-stress protocol I wrote about in my book. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily you might be jumping into a full detox, but here's what you could do. You could still use the nutritional supplements that your body needs for detoxification and for inflammation and for everything else, but you would just use them at a much lower level, at least to start. Right? And so it's not always that the programs and protocols are wrong. It's just not the right dosage for an individual. And that's where customization comes into play as well. So Anita, hopefully that gets you started. And thank you for writing in. Erica is up next. How does daylight savings time affect our biological processes and rhythms? That's a great question. So with daylight savings, what we are doing, and let me give you both times of the year, so not just spring, but also fall. So with fall, we're pushing the clock back another hour, right? So we're getting another hour of so-called daylight. So if you're typically going to bed at 9:30 p.m. or let's just use 10 p.m., you're then going to bed at 11 p.m. And then you're getting to wake up an hour later. So instead of waking up, let's say you would wake up at 6, you're waking up at what would be 7 a.m. The problem is during that fall season, you may wake up at 6 a.m. for a while, right? And which would then be what would that be in the future? 5 a.m., right? So I guess you're kind of getting pushed back a bit. And that could throw off your release of cortisol. It certainly will for the first few days. So let me give you the science behind it. So your melatonin will not naturally be produced until your body falls back into biological sync with your natural rhythms, right? So let me give you the second half of that. So then around 3 a.m., you start to produce more and more thyroid. By 6 a.m., you start to produce more and more cortisol. All right. So that's just kind of like the basics. So if you push everything back or forward, daylight savings, or what do you call it in the fall? I don't necessarily remember. There's 2 each time, right? Spring forward, fall back, right, for the clocks. That's how I remember it. But what happens is the get up and go hormone production, which is cortisol, and you can consider thyroid part of that as well. And then the fall asleep hormone, which is, let's just say, melatonin to simplify it. So what we have to understand is that we can replicate that on our own. So I traveled from East Coast to West Coast more times than I would actually care to. And that's the truth. But I have a lot of amazing colleagues and I have a lot of great opportunities and I'm very grateful for them. So I continue to fly to the West Coast. Now, when I do, I get a biological shift each time. So what I try to do is replicate my sleeping environment as best I can. If I'm only on the West Coast for 1 or 2 days, I stay on my East Coast sleep cycle, which means this. I actually go to bed by 8 p.m. when I'm on the West Coast. That's 11 p.m. Eastern time. That means I stay up for an extra hour because it's kind of really weird going to bed at 7 p.m. But at 7 p.m., I close all of the blinds and drapes in the hotel room and I make it dark and I start to get into the bedtime routine. And that's when I also use my melatonin as well. I use my sleep protocol, which is magnesium and a little adrenal soothe and liquid melatonin. But then I wake up on East Coast time as well. I might let myself sleep that extra hour because I'm going to bed an extra hour. And that's that. Now, daylight savings doesn't have to throw you off by that much because if you're going from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., that's what you know it's going to be, or you're going from 10 p.m. to 9 p.m., all you have to do is change your bedtime by a half hour that night purposely. It doesn't have to be by a full hour. It can be by a half hour, and you begin then to just retrain the body. No blue light at night, wake up in the morning with energy. So I spent a lot of time on that question. I should probably just make that its own podcast, but I actually have a podcast on not having jet lag, so you can find that, and I literally have my caffeine dose in the morning and my melatonin at night, so I have a podcast on how to eliminate jet lag. Just go to stephencabral.com/podcast and search jet lag. And if you can't find it, always just ask at cabralsupportgroup.com. All right, let's see. This next question is from Erica. Maybe the same Erica. Would you ever consider doing an episode that sums up all recommendations that you would make specifically for professional athletes and how this differs from the average client? For example, through trial and error, I feel that my body tends to need more vitamin C, zinc, and magnesium. I've also found ashwagandha to help, as well as higher protein, and I also tend to feel best around 9 hours of sleep, even when my genotype is Kapha Pitta. You're a professional boxer, 2.5 to 3 hours of training a day. Walking every day. I'm a newbie to the podcast. Want to thank you because it's already become a constant part of my routine to listen every morning, which is really comforting and helpful. So I appreciate you putting all the time and effort into doing these episodes and connecting with your audience. Thank you, Erica. Also, I was wondering if you've ever heard of the hypnotist, Marissa Peer. You give so many great recommendations, and after listening to a few of your motivation mindset podcasts, I thought her YouTube videos on mindset and taking control of your inner narrative might be something you or other members might enjoy and wanted to pay it forward. Thank you, Erica. Really appreciate you sharing that as well. I have never heard of her. I'll definitely check it out though. Again, I always keep an open mind and I love learning new things. And so absolutely, I'll check that out. So here's the thing. An athlete, just like any human being, everything is bio-individual. So I couldn't do one podcast for an athlete's diet. Just like I couldn't do one podcast ever on weight loss or one on thyroid. I have a whole course on thyroid. I have a whole course on female hormones because remember, I always say there's only 6 to 12 variables typically for why most people are unwell. That's it. Literally 6 to 12. 6 to 12 for thyroid, 6 to 12 for rheumatoid arthritis, 6 to 12 for migraines. That's it. That's it. So I always tell my personal wellness clients and those in our Equal Life practice, no matter what, it's not going to take you more than 6 months to a year to get better. Because even if we exhaust all possibilities and we're really bad at narrowing it down through lab testing, which we're not, but we could still solve all the different variables within a 12-month period of time, right? So that's always kind of how I share with people. All right. The second part though is you are onto something. The more output means you need more input. And I've shared this before in many podcasts, and it goes along with Ayurveda. The more I give out in terms of energy, the more breakdown there is in this body, which means the more energy I need to take in. Diet, right? Supplements, sleep, rest, mindset, calming. That's how we rebuild, right? So for most of our athletes, they're doing 2 daily nutritional support shakes a day. So they don't have to take a million supplements because everything's already in there, right? So we do 2 of those a day, 1 for breakfast, 1 mid-afternoon around training, and then they'll typically add more protein to that specific shake. So now they get 2 big shakes, let's say 30 grams of protein each, great. Then they get their 2 other meals. They're going to be at 120, or so, maybe 150 grams of protein a day. That takes care of their vitamin C, takes care of their extra zinc. But yes, they may use an adrenal soothe at night. They might use our sleep health protocol at night to get extra sleep. So you're right on the money. Like you're absolutely thinking the right way. I just don't do all for everyone. Like that's where most gurus get into trouble because there is no one all for everyone. But certainly you're on the right track for sure. All right, Terry's up next. My wife thinks I have nocturnal convulsions. She said I have the symptoms as described by Dr. Google. I searched to see if you have ever discussed nocturnal convulsions on your podcast and didn't find any hits. If that is what I have, what can be done? I run the Big 5 labs and I have a good idea of my mineral deficiencies that I'm working on. The symptoms seem to have gotten worse since I've been walking 10,000 plus steps a day. That one little line is very, very helpful to go through. So thank you for adding that in. But I don't know, like, again, I can't diagnose you and I don't think either could your wife. Now, if it's happening every night, you could do a sleep study, and that's an overnight where they are essentially monitoring you if you believe that this is a real issue. And it may be, like, I'm not discounting that at all. I'm not discounting it at all. However, if you have a lack of magnesium, if you have a lack of calming minerals, potassium, magnesium, things like what are in the adrenal soothe, L-theanine, phosphorylserine, ashwagandha, all of those could be tremendously helpful, right? And you just want to make sure that it's not you dropping into low blood sugar, which is causing nocturnal convulsions, you having neurological based issues, you having apneas, not being able to breathe. Those things I obviously have no idea, right? I would have no idea. They're worth looking into. But you certainly want to work on your imbalances on the Big 5. And the walking 10,000 steps, if that exacerbates it, it could be any one of the things that I just described. Could be mineral deficiencies, could be the body still amped up, could be even dropping into low blood sugar. That I don't know, but a continuous glucose monitor would tell you. And supplementing with the right products that you believe are imbalanced or that you've seen could be beneficial as well. All right, Terry, thank you for writing in. Jamie says, thank you again for everything that you do and your help to help us be a little better every day. Really appreciate you and your team. We have a bit of a quandary at home as we have a toddler just over age 2.5 and a new baby around 16 weeks. Whilst my wife and I do not have any dairy in the house, I've largely fixed my gut and I know of a sensitivity, and she's very much on board and will do the Big 5s later this year. Every medical practitioner is pushing dairy. Her nursery has dairy every day. She's exposed to some and we are okay with it as we control what we can have at home, but there is a worry about her receiving enough calcium for her growth. What specifically would you suggest food, drink-wise if you were to cut dairy completely to ensure your kids have enough calcium when growing? Also, I have an extra add-on question. Does this change as they get older? Thank you again. Okay, it's a great question. And I've done many podcasts on high calcium-based foods, so I would love for you to check that out. You can find that at stephencabral.com/podcast because I won't be able to go through all the high calcium foods for you. And again, this is just dogma. Nobody needs to drink cow's milk in order to get enough calcium. And if you're drinking homogenized cow's milk, which is super unhealthy, hard to digest, and it contains milk from cows that are again, I don't know what you're getting, but I did a whole podcast just on this, just even recently as well. But all the hormones, potentially excess cortisol, pharmaceuticals that may be in there from the estrogen that they give the cows, the recombinant bovine growth hormone. It's not good. I mean, it's really not good. Now, I mean, again, I'm not recommending this because I can't recommend this. It's not legal to recommend this. But if you're getting like a raw goat's milk or a raw sheep's milk or a raw camel milk, believe it or not, they have that. Rather than even cow's milk, it's going to be that much healthier. If you got raw cow's milk, well, that's then, again, not as easy to digest, but healthier than the regular stuff. But the truth is this, that, and a lot of people don't know this, but you can get more calcium from a glass of almond milk that you can from a glass of dairy milk, and potentially with less leaching of the calcium from your bones. So it's an interesting way to look at it. So I'm not telling you what to do. As a parent, I never tell parents what to do, but I would at least begin to understand and open your mind to possibilities. And obviously you are. And so that's why we're having this conversation. So I would love for you to listen to my podcast on high calcium foods, why dairy is not a health food. I have a podcast on that. It does not include like a raw goat's milk or sheep's milk, which can be healthy. I have no problem with that. My daughters never drank milk growing up. They're two very healthy girls. I never knock on wood, but for these ones, you always want to say that, knock on wood. If they ever needed it, of course, I would give them whatever they needed. They always got some daily nutritional support. So again, it's all in how you look at it. It's in greens, your green veggies. You can give almond milk. You can give other types of things. If it's a nut-free school, again, I understand, but do you need to bring it to school? They could have it before, they could have it after if you wanted to in a smoothie. So there's many different ways to go about this. And hopefully that was at least a pretty good start to get started. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you for your support. I really do. Thank you so much for sharing this show too with anybody you believe it could serve. I'll be back tomorrow with our Motivation and Mindset Monday, the best way to start the week. Take care.